Yo, 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 what's happening, man? Good late afternoon. It is your host, and always, first and foremost, I want to say positive energy. Positive, positive, positive energy. I want to throw all good energy, all good vibes everybody's way. I hope everybody started their day off right. Hope everybody's hustling. Hope everybody's getting to the money. Hope everybody's achieving the goals that they set for themselves, or at least trying, writing them out. Today is a day of I don't really know how to put it because it's a weird day. It's a weird fucking day. Trial started in the Derek Chauvin trial started. Chauvin, I don't know how to say his fucking last name. I don't even care to pronounce it right, but the man who murdered George Floyd is on trial today. And I want to play, what's up, Joe Sway? I want to play the opening statements, if that's all right with y'all. I want to play the opening statements for y'all because I need y'all to hear the prosecutor and what they're saying about and how they're opening this trial. But before I do that, as you can see the stats right here, he is being charged with second-degree, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter. Out of 9 out of 15 jurors are white, but it's not race-based. We'll talk about that. Excuse me. They say the timeline is expected to take 4 weeks. I don't know how you even put a timeline on this type of shit, but that's how they do, I guess. And they talk about how the courthouse is surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. For obvious reasons, because there's already going to be people outside and there's already going to be protests and people showing their support for George Floyd and everything that has transpired. It's a clear-cut case for most people with common sense, but we know how the court system is. And yeah, man, it's a weird day. It's a weird fucking day. I've been trying to not like get too deep involved with the shit, but here we are. So let me play these opening statements real quick.
You're going to learn in this case a lot about what it means to be a public servant and to have the honor of wearing this badge. It's a small badge that carries with it a large responsibility and a large accountability to the public. What does it stand for? It represents the very motto of the Minneapolis Police Department: to protect with courage, to serve with compassion, but it also represents the essence of the Minneapolis Police Department approach to the use of force against its citizens when appropriate. A sanctity of life and the protection of the public shall be the cornerstones of the Minneapolis Police Department's use of force. Compassion, sanctity of life, cornerstones, and that little badge is worn right over the officer's heart. But you're also going to learn that the officers take an oath when they become police officers. They take an oath that I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately, and as
What's
you
good,
will learn,
Sean?
as applies to this case, never employing unnecessary force or violence. And not only that, I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of police service. Symbol of public faith, ethics to police service, sanctity of life, all of this matters tremendously to this case, because you will learn that on May 25th of 2020, Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge.
Yep.
When he used excessive, an unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd, that he put his knees upon his neck and his back, grinding and crushing him until the very breath, no, ladies and gentlemen, until the very life were squeezed out of him. You will learn that he was well aware that Mr. Floyd was unarmed, that Mr. Floyd had not threatened anyone, that Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, he was completely in the control of the police, he was defenseless. You will learn what happened in that 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The most important numbers you will hear in this trial are 929. What happened in those 9 minutes and 29 seconds when Mr. Derek Chauvin was applying this excessive force to the body of Mr. George Floyd.
Whoo! That is some heavy shit, man. That is some heavy shit. And the one thing that I think people need to understand is that you're gonna God damn, I don't want to play this guy, man. I don't want to play this guy, but I have to play this guy. Where's his opening statements, man? You know what? We're gonna actually take this to the tube of you. We're gonna take this there. Because look at this bitch. We need to catch the opening statements, man. This motherfucker is 9. Let's get it. Come on. Okay, here we go.
In the force that he applied, without regard for its impact on the life of Mr. George Floyd. So let's begin by focusing then on what we will learn about this 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And you will be able to hear Mr. Floyd
we'll get
saying,
to the fuckery
please,
after
I
we
can't
hear my
breathe.
man speak.
Please, man, please. In this 9 minutes and 29 seconds, you will see that as Mr. Floyd is handcuffed there on the ground, he is verbalizing 27 times, you will hear. In the 4 minutes and 45 seconds, I can't breathe. Please, I can't breathe. You will see that Mr. Chauvin is kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck and back. He has one knee on his neck, and the knee on his back is intermittently off and on his back, as you will be able to see for yourself in the video footage.
I don't know yet.
You will hear Mr. Floyd as he's crying out. You hear him at some point cry out for his mother when he's being squeezed there. He's very close to his mother, you will learn. You will hear him say, tell my kids I love them. You will hear him say about his fear of dying.
Full disclaimer, just full disclaimer. If I end up getting emotional at any point of this stream, just know it's because of how many times I've seen this and how much common sense it is to see what's happening. But the fact that it's like on trial and there's like a whole defense behind it and people actually trying to like justify this shit, it enrages me. It makes me more mad than it does sad. You know when you get so mad that you start fucking tearing up because you want to do something about it? Like that's type of shit where I know me seeing that, if I was there, if I was one of the people that had the camera and had my shit on or whatever the fuck, or just around people that already had the shit going on, I would have said to myself, you know what? Everybody got the cameras out. This is how it's playing out. I need to at least like rush towards this guy and at least like, you know, make him put his hand up or put his knee up, flinch or something to get the pressure off of him or like do something. And I know at first, you know, I didn't want to put blame on the people that were standing there because we know how they do. Like if you watch the whole video, you'll see that the other officers there were stopping people from moving forward on that officer. There was another police officer there that was in the way of other people. Now you can rush them if you want, but now instead of one of us dying, you're gonna have multiple dying. Ain't nobody on that block or anybody that was standing in front of those police had a weapon with them, or even if they did, it wouldn't have stopped these trained killers from pulling their shit out and airing the whole block out, because they would be justified for somebody moving in on their investigation. So just keep that shit in mind, because that shit, it really fucks with my head. Like, this type of shit, it fucks with me. I hate looking at these images. I don't even like watching the video. None of that shit.
He says, I'll probably die this way. I'm through. They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me, man. You will hear him crying out, and you will hear him cry out in pain. My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts. You'll hear that for yourself. Please, I can't breathe. Please, your knee on my neck. You will hear it, and you'll see at the same time while he's crying out, Mr. Chauvin never moves. The knee remains on his neck. Sunglasses remain undisturbed on his head, and it just goes on. You will hear his final words when he says, I can't breathe. Before that time, you'll hear his voice get heavier. You will hear his words further apart. You will see that his respiration gets shallower and shallower, and finally stops when he speaks his last words, I can't breathe.
Literally his last words.
And once we have his final words, you'll see that for roughly 53 seconds, he is completely silent.
And this nigga writing shit like, what are you... He doesn't give a fuck, bro. He doesn't give a fuck. This man is sitting here describing how he murdered somebody, and he's sitting there writing shit down. This is what I'm talking about. That little shit right there, there's something that small could send off an entire group of people just by watching that. But let's continue.
Emotionless with just sporadic movements. You're going to learn those sporadic movements matter greatly in this case, because what they reflect. Mr. Floyd was no longer breathing when he's making these movements. You will learn about something in this case called an anoxic seizure. It is the body's automatic reflex when breathing has stopped due to oxygen deprivation. We'll be able to point out to you when you'll see the involuntary movements from Mr. Floyd that are part of an anoxic seizure. Not only that, you're going to learn about something that's called agonal breathing. When the heart is stopped, when blood is no longer coursing through the veins, you will hear the body gasp as an involuntary reflex. We'll point out to you when Mr. Floyd is having the agonal breathing, again, as a reflex, involuntary reflex to the oxygen deprivation. So we learn here that Mr. Floyd at some point is completely passed out. Mr. Chauvin continues on as he had. Knee on the neck, knee on the back. You'll see he does not let up and he does not get up. For the remaining, as you can see, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. During this period of time, you will learn that Mr. Chauvin is told that they can't even find the pulse of Mr. Floyd. You learn he's told that twice. They can't even find the pulse. You'll be able to see for yourself what he does in response. You will see that he does not let up and that he does not get up. Even when Mr. Floyd does not even have a pulse, it continues on. It continues on, ladies and gentlemen, even after the ambulance arrives on the scene. The ambulance is there, and you'll be able to see for yourself what Mr. Chauvin is doing when the ambulance is there. You can compare, you'll be able to compare how he looks in this photograph to how he looked in the first 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Same position, doesn't let up, and you'll see he doesn't get up. The paramedic from the ambulance comes over. You'll be able to see this in the video. He checks Mr. Floyd for a pulse. He has to check him for a pulse, you'll see, with Mr. Chauvin continuing to remain on his body at the same time. Doesn't get up even when the paramedic comes to check for a pulse and doesn't find one. Mr. Chauvin doesn't get up. You will see that the paramedics have taken the gurney out of the ambulance, have rolled it over next to the body of Mr. Floyd, and you'll be able to see Mr. Chauvin still does not let up, doesn't get up. And you will see it wasn't until such time as they want to move the lifeless body of George Floyd onto the gurney. Only then does Mr. Chauvin let up and get up. And you'll see him drag Mr. Floyd's body and unceremoniously cast it onto the gurney. And that was for a total of 4 minutes and 44 seconds. You can see here that for the first 4 minutes and 45 seconds, you'll learn that Mr. Floyd was calling out, crying for his life. And ladies and gentlemen, not just Mr. Floyd. You're going to hear and see that there were any number of bystanders who were there, who were also calling out to let up and get up, such that Mr. Floyd would be able to breathe and to maintain and to sustain his life. But then for the remaining 4 minutes and 44 seconds, Mr. Floyd was either unconscious, breathless, or pulseless. And the compression, the squeezing, the grinding went on just the same for the total of 9 minutes and 29 seconds. You're going to learn in this case quite a lot about the Minneapolis Police Department's use of.
That's what I don't get. You see his lawyer? Look at Derek's lawyer. This nigga isn't writing shit down. He's sitting here listening to what the man is saying. Now, granted, I know he's not sitting there listening to him and like, oh man, he has a point. But he ain't picked up a pen yet. Or at least held a pen as long as this nigga's been holding the pen. He's so nervous. He's so fucking stuck in realizing and not even understanding the murder that he committed, that he's doing everything to deflect and to like just take away from the story of even trying to listen of what he did. He hasn't put that fucking pen down once. What are you writing this man's whole statement? What is it?
Force policy. What you're going to see and learn a lot about,
look at his old nervous
is what
bitch
is the
ass.
standard for applying force against individuals, the use of force policy. You learn that Minneapolis Police Department employees shall only use the amount of force that is objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances. The force used shall be consistent with current Minneapolis Police Department training. What you learn, ladies and gentlemen, is that the use of force must be evaluated from one moment to the next moment, from moment to moment. What may be reasonable in the first minute may not be reasonable in the second minute, the fourth minute, or the 9th minute and 29 seconds. That it has to be evaluated from moment to moment. You'll also learn that the Minneapolis police are precluded, not allowed, to use any more force than is necessary to bring a person under their control. They can't use any more restraint than is necessary. You're going to meet an expert. His name is Jody Steger. He's a Los Angeles Police Department sergeant and a use of force expert. He's going to tell you that the force that Mr. Chauvin was using was lethal force. It was force that was capable of killing a human or putting his or her life in danger. The evidence is going to show you that there was no cause in the first place to use lethal force against a man who was defenseless, who was handcuffed, who was not resisting. That there was no cause to use that force in the first place. You're going to hear from Minneapolis Police Sergeant David Pleeger, who's going to come and talk with you. He was the officer on the scene, so he arrived at the scene after this took place. He is going to tell you that the force against Mr. Floyd should have ended as soon as they put him on the ground in the first place.
Are we
Meaning
really?
that the 929 should not have been even a 1, much less the 929. And that went on for way too long. He will tell you in terms of the restraint on the ground and the manner of the restraint for Mr. Floyd. You're also going to learn about another very important policy in the Minneapolis Police Department that's a core principle of policing. You will hear this phrase that police have to live by in terms of how it is they relate to the public. In your custody is in your care. In your custody is in your care, meaning that if you as an officer have an individual, a subject that's in your custody, it is your duty to care for that person. And you will learn that caring, ladies and gentlemen, is not a feeling. It's a verb. It's something you're supposed to do to provide care for that person. You are going to hear from any number of police officers who will talk about this duty to provide care. Officer Nicole McKenzie, who is the Minneapolis Police Department Medical Support Coordinator. You'll hear from Sergeant Kerr Yang, the MPD Crisis Intervention Coordinator. In your custody is in your care. You're going to learn that when Mr. Floyd was unconscious, that when he was breathless, when he did not have a pulse,
pay attention,
that there was a duty to have administered care, to let up and get up. You will learn. You listen to Minneapolis Police Commander Katie Blackwell. No relation to my knowledge. But you will hear from Katie Blackwell, and she's going to tell you about the training that Mr. Chauvin received. You're going to hear that he was a veteran on the Minneapolis Police Department for 19 years, had been trained in CPR multiple times at the time. And you'll be able to see for yourself that when Mr. Floyd was in distress, Mr. Chauvin wouldn't help him, didn't help him. But you're also going to see that he stopped anybody else from being able to help him. You will learn that amongst the bystanders was a first responder, a member of the Minneapolis Fire Department, who was trained in administering first aid and emergency care. She's going to come and talk with you. Her name is Genevieve Hansen.
This part is what pissed me off right here, because they were trying to stop her from coming into the trial because they knew how important she was. Somebody who, for one, you want to try, he's trying to stop this nigga from looking like a fucking murderer. So anybody that is coming forward to make him look like exactly what the fuck he is, they're trying to stop it. See, pre-trial, the defense tried to say that there shouldn't be no need for this paramedics lady to pull up on them and come to the trial and speak her side, because they tried to say that she was gonna say that she could have saved George Floyd's life. And there's no what ifs in this whole thing. It's just gonna make him look bad. But in reality, what happened was this demon ass piece of shit right here who murdered George Floyd saw her come over and try to help and refused her. So not only could she have tried to help, who knows what would have happened to George Floyd if she was able to do that. So neither of them knew what could have happened, but we do know that she could have tried and she was denied of trying. It'll be one thing if they had her as a witness to somebody who actually tried to save George Floyd and she said, I could have, then there would be no need for her to come because she tried. But she got refused. These coward-ass, hoe-ass niggas refused her help. So there was no trying at all. George Floyd had to sit there and die. No help, no nothing. And people tried to. And this is the nigga that told them not to.
She wanted to check his pulse. She wanted to check on Mr. Floyd's well-being. She wanted him to let up and get up. She did her best to intervene, to be able to act, to intercede on George Floyd's behalf, and you'll be able to see for yourself when she approached Mr. Chauvin on top of George Floyd with both of his knees, reached for his mace in his belt and pointed in her direction.
That's a fact.
So she couldn't help. She'll come and talk with you about that experience. Now, you're going to learn that in the aftermath of this, that Mr. Chauvin's last day of employment with the Minneapolis Police Department was on May 26th of 2020. The Minneapolis Chief of Police, Chief Arredondo, is going to come here to talk with you. He was the police chief at the time. He's the chief today. He is going to tell you that Mr. Chauvin's conduct was not consistent with Minneapolis Police Department training, was not consistent with Minneapolis Police Department policy,
Nope.
was not reflective of the Minneapolis Police Department.
Not
He
at
will
all.
not mince any words. He's very clear. He'd be very decisive that this was excessive force. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what was this all about in the first place? Well, you're going to learn that it was about a counterfeit $20 bill used at a convenience store. That's all. You will not hear any evidence that Mr. Floyd knew that it was fake or did it on purpose. You will learn from witnesses we will call that the police officers could have written him a ticket and let the court sort it out. You will learn that even if he did it on purpose, it was a minor offense, a misdemeanor. So in terms of the charges that we are bringing, we're going to prove to you that Mr. Chauvin's conduct was a substantial cause of Mr. Floyd's death. We've charged him with murder in the second degree, murder in the third degree, and manslaughter for using excessive force against George Floyd. You will learn that the use of excessive and unreasonable force against a citizen is an assault. In this case, we will show you that this was an assault that contributed to taking his life, an assault. We're going to show you that putting knees on somebody's neck, Mr. Floyd's, putting a knee on his back for 9 minutes and 29 seconds was an eminently dangerous activity. And he did it without regard to what impact it had on Mr. Floyd's life. We're going to show you that also. Putting him on the ground, we call that the prone position, on your stomach, face down. Putting him in the prone position, handcuffed like this in the first place, was uncalled for and was an excessive use of force, let alone for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Now, how are we going to prove these charges? We're going to prove it, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost by witness testimony. We're going to bring in some of those bystanders that I've referred to, normal folks. They'll tell you what they saw. They'll tell you why they stopped. They'll tell you why they were concerned. They'll tell you from that witness chair. We'll bring them in here. You're going to hear from any number of police officers responsible for training, responsible for what the officers learn around first aid, coming to the care of others. We'll bring in a number of police officers, including the chief of police. But we're also going to bring in various professionals and experts.
Imagine having the chief of police.
Experts in
Yo,
police
think about
conduct.
that. Imagine having the whole chief of police not even backing you. But there's some type of conversation around you being innocent.
You're going to
crazy.
meet any number of them. You'll have here a forensic pathologist, Dr. Thomas, who studies the tissues of the deceased as a forensic pathologist to
That's a
determine
fact,
the cause
Sean.
and manner of death.
Every cop involved is guilty.
You're going to hear from a
They all need to go to
pulmonologist,
trial too.
Dr. Tobin. He's a lung specialist, cardiologist, heart specialist, critical care physicians, emergency medicine physicians, internal medicine, and also from toxicology. We're also going to bring in the court Dr. Andrew Baker, who's the Hennepin County medical examiner, who will tell you about what he found. So we'll also bring him in. But we'll also bring in experts who will prove that the use of force here was not reasonable. I mentioned earlier Jody Steger, Chief of Staff for the Inspector General, LA Police Department, and Seth Stoughton. You'll hear from both of them. Now, I've spent a few minutes talking to you about what this case is about. There are any number of things that this case is not about. Maybe an infinite number of things the case isn't about. But one of those things that this case is not about all police or all policing. You will learn from Chief Arredondo when he comes that police officers have difficult jobs. They have to make split-second decisions. They sometimes have to make split-second life and death decisions. In this trial, you're going to meet any number of the men and women from the Minneapolis Police Department who do a fantastic job. They're committed, take very seriously preserving the sanctity of life. I mentioned already Commander Katie Blackwell, Sergeant Carrie Yang, Officer Nicole McKenzie, to name a few. This case is about Mr. Derek Chauvin and not about any of those men and women, and it's not about all policing at all. And this case is not about split-second decision-making. In 9 minutes and 29 seconds, there are 479 seconds, not a split second among them. That's what this case is about.
Yep.
You are going to hear from one of the bystanders, Charles McMillan. And Charles McMillan is going to talk to you about the excessive force that he saw Mr. Chauvin displaying on May 25th. And he will tell you what he experienced in the way that Mr. Chauvin looked at him and the other bystanders who were calling out for Mr. Floyd's life. He will tell you what he saw in terms of Mr. Chauvin never letting up or getting up on his body.
Letting up, getting up.
You will be able to observe Mr. Chauvin's body language for yourself in the video and determine what that language says to you.
Yep.
So I'm going to show you in a moment one of the videos that you're going to see in this trial, just to kind of tee up for you what will be the essence of what we will be focused on in the trial. I need to tell you ahead of time that the video is graphic, that it can be difficult to watch. It is simply the nature of what we're dealing with in this trial, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see any number of videos from the police officers who had body-worn cameras on. But you're also going to see videos from the bystanders, normal folks, the bystanders. You're going to see these bystanders, a veritable bouquet of humanity, these bystanders. You'll see here a little girl who's wearing a green shirt on the right with the words love on the green shirt. I won't say her name now because she's a minor, but she is going to come and talk with you about what she saw. Next to her in the blue pants is her cousin, who at the time was also a minor. So I won't tell you her name, but she's also going to come in and talk to you. Cousin was taking the younger one to Cup Foods to be able to pick up candy and snacks when they came upon what was happening with Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd on the ground. Next to the young woman in the blue pants is Genevieve Hanson, the first responder who tried to intervene to check his pulse and to check on Mr. Floyd. She's going to come and testify to you. Next to her is a young man named Donald Williams, trained with a security background. He's also trained in mixed martial arts, who was very excited and alarmed about what he saw in the exchange between Mr. Chauvin on top of George Floyd. He's going to come in and testify to you. So any number of these bystanders, and others also, will be coming in to talk with you. And so they come from the broad spectrum of humanity.
I'm not going to watch the video. I don't want to watch the video.
Different races, in and out. And you'll see Mr. Floyd doing his best to kind of crank his right shoulder up, having to lift up his weight and Mr. Chauvin's weight on top of him to get a breath for as long as he could get a breath.
May 5th, lawyers to keep track of that and analyzed.
Against George Floyd, that was an assault that contributed to taking his life, and for engaging in eminently dangerous behavior, putting the knee on the neck, the knee on the back, for 9 minutes and 29 seconds without regard for Mr. Floyd's life. We're going to ask that you find him guilty of murder in the second degree, murder in the third degree, and second degree manslaughter. Thank you.
Let's hear the
Wilson, do you wish to open
fuckery.
at this time?
Yes, sir.
You may.
May it please the court, counsel,
Let's hear these mayonnaise
Mr.
excuses.
Chauvin, members of the jury. A reasonable doubt is a doubt that is based upon reason and common sense. At the end of this case, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about doubt. But for purposes of my remarks this morning, I want to talk about reason and common sense and how that applies to the evidence.
The fact that he started out with reason and common sense is just the biggest, like niggas is starting out pissing on motherfuckers. That's what the defense just did. They just started out trying to piss on motherfuckers. How do you talk about reason and common sense where there's video? Like, imagine if they caught a black dude on camera choking a cop out. And then when that black dude went to trial, his defense started talking about reason and common sense. Niggas would find him guilty immediately. But, you know.
That you're about to see during the course of this trial. Reason is an idea that wholly permeates our law, our legal system, and it forms the foundation. And you will see and hear that repeatedly throughout the course of this trial. What would a reasonable police officer do? What is a reasonable use of force? What would a reasonable person do in his or her most important affairs?
Not what
What
your
is a
client
reasonable
did.
doubt? As such, reason dictates and necessitates how the evidence must be looked at and analyzed in every single case. And common sense is exactly that. It's common sense. Common sense tells you that there are always two sides to a story. Common sense tells us that we need to examine the totality of the circumstances.
Two sides to a story. It's funny because when you read a book, you only get the whole story because you're reading the book. You have the book in front of you. You have the pages and the chapters. You wouldn't need nobody to have to tell you what the book is about because you are reading the book yourself. You see it. It's there. The book, the whole book in its entirety. We're not talking about an opinion. We're not talking about any guesses. We're not talking about something that is hearsay. It's on video. How do you even defend that?
Circumstances to determine the meaning of evidence and how it can be applied to the questions of reasonableness of actions and reactions. In other words, common sense is the application of sound judgment based upon a reasoned analysis. And that's what this case is ultimately about. It's about the evidence in this case. The evidence that you will see in this case during this trial. It is, I agree with counsel for the state, it is nothing more than that. There is no political or social cause in this courtroom. But the evidence is far greater than 9 minutes and 29 seconds.
Is it?
In this case, you will learn that the evidence has been collected broadly and expansively.
Hey,
Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension employed nearly 50 case agents and
he is spending so much time talking about how much evidence there is because he's filling up space. Because the evidence he's talking about is so minuscule, it's so little that he has to fill up most of the space by just saying we have evidence. And the evidence, and all the people they gathered for the case, for the evidence.
Analysts and technicians
Lawyers are
to
funny as fuck.
investigate this case. The Federal Bureau of Investigation included at least 28 additional agents in their investigation.
Cool.
These agents combined have engaged in an extensive and far-reaching investigation.
Still going, huh?
They have interviewed over 50 members of the Minneapolis Police Department,
Still
including
going.
the officers who responded to the scene after Mr. Floyd was brought to the hospital. They interviewed members of the Minneapolis Police Department command staff. They interviewed officers who oversee training and policy-making decisions within the Minneapolis Police Department. They have
Hey, side note, I'm very curious to see if this guy is going to admit that George Floyd didn't have to die. Because if that's the case, if he can't even admit to the fact that George Floyd didn't have to die just to try to see his client, just to try to see him win a case, oh man, Minnesota, turn up.
Interviewed nearly
All the way.
200 civilian
Eric
witnesses.
J.
in
Nelson,
this
that's
case.
his name.
Some of these witnesses saw the entire incident. Some who saw a portion of the incident. Many who saw nothing. And some who had some piece of information to give to the officers. And others who had nothing.
Yo, I'm sorry, I keep stopping it, but it's because of all the bull. You have no idea. Like, if I was in front of this man, there'd be no way he'd be saying any of this. There are some people who saw it all. There's some people who saw some, and there's some people who saw nothing at all. So you mean the people that didn't see the video of him being murdered and the surveillance beforehand, before there was any cell phone footage? You mean to tell me that that doesn't count for anything? You tell it that, like, they're really trying to explain that what we saw, we didn't see. That's what the fuck they trying to do.
These agents interviewed the numerous medical personnel who attended to Mr. Floyd, and they interviewed the numerous firefighters and paramedics who responded. Agents executed approximately a dozen search warrants in this case to gather information. And in the end, you will hear a term throughout, I believe, this case called the Bates stamp number. The Bates stamp system is a way for lawyers to keep track of the case, to make sure that we are working from the same set of documents, the same set of evidence, to preserve the integrity of the investigation. You will learn that we are approaching 50,000 Bates stamped items. So this case is clearly more than about 9 minutes and 29 seconds. As you all saw during jury selection, the witness list in this case neared 400 people. So how do we begin to analyze and organize this evidence? I suggest that you let common sense and reason guide you.
Okay.
I propose that every witness you will hear from and every piece of evidence that you will see or hear during this trial can be assigned to one of 4 basic locations: Cup Foods, the Mercedes-Benz, Squad 320, and Hennepin County Medical Center. So let's start at the first, Cup Foods. You will learn that on May 25th, 2020, shortly after 7 o'clock p.m., Mr. Floyd and his friend Maurice Hall entered the Cup Foods located at 38th in Chicago. While they were there, they ran into their other friend, or Mr. Floyd's ex-girlfriend, Shawanda Hill, and he offered her a ride. You will hear from Chris Martin, who is the store clerk at Cup Foods. Mr. Martin observed Mr. Floyd. He watched his body language. He interacted with Mr. Floyd in this moment, and Mr. Martin formed the opinion that Mr. Floyd was under the influence of something. You will see the actual video from inside Cup Foods. Mr. Floyd did use a counterfeit $20 bill to purchase a pack of cigarettes. Mr. Martin realized this, and first, along with another one of his co-workers named Nabil Walter, went outside to the car where Mr. Floyd, Mr. Hall, and Miss Hill were sitting. Mr. Martin asked Mr. Floyd to come in and either buy the cigarettes, exchange, or return the cigarettes. And you will hear from Mr. Martin that Mr. Hall and Mr. Floyd refused. You will hear that a short time later, Mr. Martin went back to the car a second time. He went back to ask them again, please come inside, give us the money, or return the cigarettes. And that second time, again, Mr. Floyd refused.
So, in other words, not only did these motherfuckers who worked at Cup Foods, they could have just said, fuck it, and let those cigarettes go, and let that counterfeit 20 go. Even the second time, they could have been like, you know what, fuck it. They not trying to give it up, whatever. Nah, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. Watch, just.
So, at 8:01 p.m., a second clerk from the Cup Foods named Omar Kamara called 911 to report Mr. Floyd. During that call, Mr. Camaro, you will hear, described Mr. Floyd as drunk and that he could not control himself. He's not acting right. He's 6 to 6.5 feet tall. Accordingly, Minneapolis police officers Thomas Lane and Alexander King were dispatched to the scene and arrived at 8:08 p.m. They were driving Minneapolis Squad Car 320, and they faced parking southbound in the northbound lane of Chicago Avenue and were directed by store employees immediately to the second location, the Mercedes-Benz. During this trial, you will hear evidence of what happened in the Mercedes-Benz in the 20 to 30 minutes prior to the police arriving. You will hear from Mr. Floyd's friends, Shawanda Hill and Maurice Hall. This will include evidence that while they were in the car, Mr. Floyd consumed what were thought to be 2 Percocet pills. Mr. Floyd's friends will explain that Mr. Floyd fell asleep in the car and that they couldn't wake him up, that they kept trying to wake him up to get going, that they thought the police might be coming because now the store was coming out, and they kept trying to wake him up. And in fact, one of these friends called her daughter, Miss Hill, Shawanda Hill, called her daughter, Shakira Prince, to come and pick her up because they couldn't keep Mr. Floyd awake. At 8:09 p.m., Officers Lane and King approached the vehicle, and Officer Lane approached the driver's side of the vehicle, and Officer King approached the passenger side. During the course of this trial, you will see and hear the body-worn cameras of these officers that fully capture the entire interaction with Mr. Floyd.
Exactly, Tony. Exactly.
You will see Officer Lane draw his service weapon after Mr. Floyd failed several times to respond to his commands to show him his hands. You will learn that that is an acceptable police practice. You will see the officers struggle with Mr. Floyd to get him out of the Mercedes-Benz and handcuffed. And you will see and hear everything that these officers and Mr. Floyd say to each other. The evidence will show
what they said
that
to
when
each other
confronted by police, Mr. Floyd put drugs in his mouth in an effort to conceal them from the police. At approximately 8:10 p.m., Officer Peter Chang of the Minneapolis Park Police responds. He responds to the scene to assist Officers King and Lane, and he helps in detaining the passengers. You will see Officer Chang's body-worn camera, and you will hear his interactions. This becomes important as we learn about police practices, because what you will learn is that when an officer responds to what is sometimes a routine and minimal event, it often evolves into a greater and more serious event.
Yeah, who escalates the shit? Who's trained? Who is the citizens versus the people who are trained? Answer that. Majority of the time, the police escalate the fucking situation. Y'all are the ones who are trained. You should know that when something is happening, most likely people aren't going to like what the fuck you're doing. What happened was his ego and his hate combined. Everybody on the sideline that was saying something, yelling something to him, he didn't want to feel like he was doing something wrong. So he continued to do the fuck shit, the bullshit that he did that ended up killing somebody. And that's not even what he's talking about. You notice that he's using the reference 9 minutes and 29 seconds because he's not saying his client kneeling on someone's neck. He's not saying, he's refusing to say the murder action. He's just saying 9 minutes and 29 seconds. There's a skill to being a lawyer. And he's using that thinking, in my opinion, if I was the judge, man, like, Of course, being a judge, you cannot be biased in any way. Right? But if I have video evidence and I hear somebody telling me about everything that transpired beforehand instead of what actually killed somebody, I would have been told this motherfucker, hey, this is irrelevant. From him having a fake $20 bill to the police being called to whatever drugs he was on, from him going to sleep and waking up, from him getting in handcuffs, all that stuff right there, it literally has nothing to do with why he decided to stay on his neck for that long. That has nothing to do with that. He's saying that what happened beforehand is he's justifying why he got killed. But he won't say that it's a justification. He's still not, he's trying to justify it, but the words won't come out of his mouth that George Floyd deserved to die. And the words probably won't come out of his mouth that George Floyd didn't deserve to die either.
Near Squad 320 from a local business called the Dragon Walk that capture the actions and reactions of everyone present at that location, including evidence of further concealment of controlled substances. During the course of the investigation, 2 search warrants were executed on the Mercedes-Benz. The first on May 27th of 2020, the second several months later on December 9th of 2020. BCA agents located various pieces of evidence during both of these searches, including 2 pills that later analysis by the BCA revealed to be a mixture of methamphetamine and fentanyl. This is what's called a speedball, a mixture of an opiate and a stimulant. You will learn that these pills were manufactured to have the appearance of Percocet. While standing next to the Mercedes-Benz, Officer King and Officer Lane both asked Mr. Floyd what he was on. And he says he is on nothing. Officer King and Lane escorted
talking to the police,
Mr.
nigga. What the fuck?
Floyd to the third location, Minneapolis Squad 320. The evidence will show that as Officers King and Lane escorted Mr. Floyd to their squad car, a citizen by the name of Charles.
Hey, let's use this bitch-ass nigga's logic against him, since he wants to start this out with saying this has to do with logic and reason, right? Or reason and common sense. So let's say reason why George Floyd didn't tell them he was on anything was because he was talking to the police. Common sense would tell you that a regular citizen who is probably doing something illegal isn't going to just tell the fucking police, the people who are there to fucking do something about shit illegal, that they're doing something illegal. Reason, common sense, there you go, you fucking bitch.
McMillian walked alongside them. He kind of joined them. And he was encouraging Mr. Floyd to cooperate with the officers. Get in the car, you can't win. The evidence will show that Mr. Floyd and the officers began to struggle as they attempted to get him in the squad car. And you will learn that Officers Derek Chauvin and his partner Tu Tao arrived to assist Officers King and Lane at 8:16 and 48 seconds, almost 8:17. Upon their arrival, the first thing that Officer Chauvin sees is Officers King and Lane struggling with Mr. Floyd. Mr. Chauvin asked the officers, is he under arrest? Yes. And then Officer Chauvin began to assist them in their efforts to get him into the squad car. You will see that 3 Minneapolis police officers could not overcome the strength of Mr. Floyd. Mr. Chauvin stands 5'9", 140 pounds. Mr. Floyd is 6'3", weighs 223 pounds. You will learn that because of this intersection.
But Derek Chauvin, however you want to spell his bitch ass name or say it, is 5'9", 100 and something pounds, but he has a fucking gun. He has pepper spray, he has a taser, he has a baton, and he has handcuffs. George Floyd didn't have nothing but his fucking strength while you guys trying to make him seem like the fucking Hulk. But anyway, let's continue listening to some of this bullshit this nigga saying.
At 38th and Chicago is considered a high crime area. The city installs what's called the Milestone Video System. It's a camera that sits high atop a pole and can surveil the entire intersection. When you see these videos pulled back from afar, you will be able to see the Minneapolis police squad car rocking back and forth during this struggle. So much so that it catches the attention of the 911 dispatcher, Jenna Scurry. This was not an easy struggle.
It still doesn't justify murder. Don't be a cop if you scared. You motherfucking right, Raven. Talking about a struggle. My nigga was handcuffed and in the back of a police car. You talking about a struggle. Niggas struggle with people every day, B. Police struggle with people every day and still get their ass to jail. Bruh, it is part of your job. You were trained for this. All four of you niggas couldn't be able to subdue one person, handcuff him, and put him in the car. Y'all kept him on the ground for how long? I mean, at a point, even if there was a struggle, at the point you have this man now subdued on the ground, face down, handcuffed. Let's get to that part, buddy. Why you sitting here trying to talk about everything else that has nothing to do with this cop fucking putting his knee on somebody's neck? Talking about don't do drugs, kids. Your mom is sniffing an 8-ball right now, nigga. She's boofing heroin right now. Don't worry about the kids. Worry about your mama. Drugs ain't got shit to do with somebody being suffocated to death. And I'm open for all the trolls too. I'm open for all of you. I'm open to the shit. I'm with the shit. I'm ready and willing to clap back. Please say some stupid ass shit in this chat. You won't even catch it from just me. You gonna catch it from everybody else in this motherfucker. Bring that trolling shit here if you want to. These motherfuckers right here, boy, I tell you.
As the struggle continues, you will see and hear both what Mr. Floyd was saying to the officers and the officers' responses to him. Mr. Floyd does end up on the street and appeared to continue to struggle to these officers, so much so that they considered applying what's called the maximal restraint technique. It used to be called the hobble or the hog tie. Mr. Chauvin used his knee to pin Mr. Floyd's left shoulder blade and back to the ground, and his right knee to pin Mr. Floyd's left arm to the ground. Officer King was placed below Mr. Floyd's buttocks, and Officer Lane was at the feet. And you will see and hear them continue to struggle with Mr. Floyd as he's attempting to kick. You will see and hear that a crowd begins to develop, watching and recording officers, initially fairly passive. As the situation went on, the crowd began to grow angry. But here's what you will also see and hear. You will see and hear the conversation between the officers behind the squad car. The crowd is not aware of what they are saying and doing. You will learn that several bystanders, including Donald Williams and Genevieve Hansen, they grew more and more and more upset with these officers.
I wonder why, nigga. I wonder why. He's talking about the people that can't see the other officers doing whatever it is that they're doing. They didn't need to look at them. It was probably that bitch ass nigga that hit the. I don't give a fuck about him. They are looking at the person who is murdering somebody. They don't need to see somebody putting on handcuffs or hog tying somebody. What they gave a fuck about was the man dying and getting the life taken from him, getting the air cut off from his circulation. That's what they're paying attention to. Talking about reason and common sense. Let me use this bitch ass nigga's logic against him again. Reason. The reason why the crowd, the two people that you just named that are going to be witnesses, why you named them in the first place to try to discredit them, to try to make it seem like they're here off emotion and not off of what they actually saw and experienced. He mentioned them talking about they got more upset and more agitated or whatever the fuck the case may be. The reason why is because they see a man with his knee on somebody's neck killing them, and he won't let up. He won't let up. You won't even move. You can't even move over 5 inches more on his back than his neck. Like somebody even said can you just put your fucking knee on his back? You got to be on his neck. I wonder why they're being that agitated. I wonder why they got increasingly aggravated. I wonder why. Common sense will be that these people are watching a murder and they don't like it. Reason, common sense. Once again, let me see if I can debunk this motherfucker again.
You've seen it this morning. But you will also see it from the perspective of the police officers. As the crowd grew in size, seemingly so too did their anger. And remember, there's more to the scene than just what the officers
and y'all
see
can
in front
combat
of
them motherfuckers, by the way. Combat them little pussy ass motherfuckers. Just like the video. It don't matter. You like the video.
There are people across the street. There are cars stopping. People yelling. There is a growing crowd and what officers perceive to be a threat.
Why?
They're called names. You heard them this morning. A fucking bum. They're screaming at him, causing the officers to divert their attention from the care of Mr. Floyd to the threat that was growing in front of them.
Wait. So you mean to tell me somebody that called a trained officer a fucking bum is the reason why they didn't try to help this man? Or the reason why he didn't take his knee off his neck? Because he got called a fucking bum? You mean to tell me people yelling from the sidelines stopped him from getting off his neck? Now, maybe it's just me. I don't know. But if I had a crowd surround me, I wouldn't be in a position to where I'm vulnerable. You're kneeling. Your back is turned. He didn't give a fuck about who was behind him. He was directly looking at the people in front of him that were shouting and yelling at him to let up off of him. And you're going to see it in the video. Why the fuck is this guy even saying this dumb shit? Why like, you got to think about that. They're gonna see this in the video about his, and when the prosecutor said pay attention to his body language, because they know for a fact when you see that video, you're gonna hear one of the people that took the video say, "Look at him. He don't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck." You mean to tell me out of all the people screaming for help, yelling for help, because that's why the crowd got the reason in common sense. The reason why a crowd gathered in the middle of 38th and Chicago was because they saw somebody getting killed by the police, and common sense would be outrage. Let's continue to hear this stupid motherfucker talk for
At
5
this
more minutes.
location, questions emerge about the reasonableness of the use of force. And this will ultimately become one of the decisions that you have to make. To answer these questions, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the evidence will show that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension investigated the Minneapolis Police Department's training and policies. You will learn about things such as the authorized use of force, proportionality of force, excited delirium, defensive tactics, including
Excited
prone
delirium.
handcuffing, neck restraints, max
Excited delirium? Are they going to say that people got so excited around watching somebody die that they got delirious and didn't see what the fuck they saw?
maximal restraint technique, the swarm technique. You will learn about rapidly evolving situations and the Minneapolis Police Department's decision-making model. You will learn about crowd control, medical intervention, de-escalation, procedural justice, crisis intervention, and the human factors of force. That is, what happens to a police officer or any person when they are involved in a high-stress use of force situation. And you will learn that Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do over the course of his 19-year career.
Ha!
The use of force is not attractive, but it is a necessary component of policing. The evidence will again demonstrate that the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension conducted 2 searches of Squad 320. You will learn that in the second search of Squad 320, agents recovered several pieces of partial.
Ooh. See, this bitch ass motherfucker didn't say that in the pre-trial. He didn't say anything about a second search. He just said that in the back of the squad car, they found drugs. Now, he has to be specific because it's going to be known that the cop car was checked already and nothing was found. And then the second time, they just magically found drugs powdered and spread out across the fucking back seat. Interesting.
Partially dissolved pills. You will learn that these pills were again analyzed, were again shown to be consistent or similar to the pills found on the Mercedes-Benz, in that they contained methamphetamine and traces of fentanyl. Moreover,
doesn't justify
these
murder.
pills contained the DNA and saliva of George Floyd. Which leads us to our final location, Hennepin County Medical Center. The evidence will show that officers made 2 calls for emergency help. Those calls were within 1 minute and 30 seconds of each other. The first call, officers called for paramedics to arrive code 2 because Mr. Floyd had a nose injury. He was bleeding from the nose. That occurred during the struggle. Mr. Floyd banged his face into the plexiglass partition of the squad car. You will see the blood evidence in the squad car. That first call came at 8 minutes.
Now, before he was talking about all the body cam footage evidence that they had. But see how he specifically said that they're just going to see blood and see the aftermath of the fucking altercation? No. Show the body cam footage and show the fucking in-car footage of everything that happened. Show everything. Now, I'm not saying that George didn't hit his face on some glass, but show it. You talking about all the video evidence you got? Show everything. Show everything is in its entirety. Show it all. Let people see how none of the shit that you're talking about has anything to do with how that man died.
It's 8 o'clock, 20 minutes, and 11 seconds. The second call was what's called a stepped-up call, or a code 3 call, meaning get here as fast as you possibly can. That call was made and placed at 8 o'clock, 21 minutes, and 35 seconds. You will learn that paramedics arrived on scene at 8:27 and 18 seconds, just 19 minutes after Officers King and Lane arrived, within 6 minutes of it being called a Code 3, and they did what they refer to as a load and go because of the crowd. They came, they picked up rather than attempting to resuscitate him or treat him on the scene, they loaded him into the ambulance and they drove to a location several blocks away to begin their resuscitative efforts. And you will hear and learn that Officer Thomas Lane accompanied them for part of that time. You will learn ultimately that Mr. Floyd was transported to the emergency department at Hennepin County. Efforts to save Mr. Floyd were made at the direction of Dr. Bradford Wankeed Langenfeld. Again, he took important tests. He ran blood samples and blood gas samples. He took obtained very important pieces of information. And you will learn that later that evening, Mr. Floyd was pronounced dead. The evidence will show then that Dr. Andrew Baker of the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office conducted the only autopsy of Mr. Floyd. And you will hear of several interviews that Dr. Baker had with law enforcement, where he discusses the cause and manner of death and what that actually means according to what he saw present in Mr. Floyd's body. And some of this evidence is extremely important to the final determination of Mr. Floyd's cause of death. The medical findings include things such as the blood gas test that was taken at HCMC that revealed Mr. Floyd had an exceptionally high level of carbon dioxide. Dr. Baker found none of what are referred to as the telltale signs of asphyxiation. There were no bruises to Mr. Floyd's neck, either on his skin or after peeling his skin back to the muscles.
What the fuck is he talking about? Now, if somebody's just pressing on your shit, yeah, there'll be some bruising. But he wasn't just on the back of his neck. He's talking about, bruh, what we saw and what is there, what is evident to see, what is evident to hear. What they're saying is George Floyd would have died that night regardless. That's what they're saying. Now let's step back into reality real quick. How many motherfucking crackheads do y'all know? Now we're not talking about George Floyd. We're talking about crackheads that you know. People that get high religiously 24/7. How many episodes of Cops have you watched? How many meth heads have you seen the cops deal with every single day? I have not seen one die out of being put in police custody. Motherfuckers take high amounts of drugs. It does not mean that he would have died from that. How you just all of a sudden just decide to, how did you all of a sudden overdose after being choked out? He was talking the entire time until he got fucking unconscious. Think about that. He was conscious, speaking, saying what it was that, like, he's speaking for himself. See, usually somebody's getting shot. There's no time to hear them say anything or try to express how they feel in the moment. George Floyd was able to express himself, what the fuck was happening with him. being on those drugs. He was telling you he couldn't breathe. He was telling you to get off him. He was telling you this is killing him. He had a chance to speak before he died. So all this other shit is irrelevant.
Beneath. There was no petechial hemorrhaging. There was no evidence that Mr. Floyd's airflow was restricted, and he did not determine to be a positional or mechanical asphyxia death. At the time Mr. Floyd was in the hospital, a femoral blood draw was taken. That blood draw was analyzed by a lab. The results of Mr. Floyd's toxicology screen revealed the presence of fentanyl and methamphetamine, among other things. And it will be important to know the difference between fentanyl and methamphetamine. The autopsy revealed many other issues, including coronary disease, an enlarged heart, what's called a paraganglioma, which is a tumor that secretes adrenaline.
An enlarged heart. Somebody who was getting choked out by a knee with an enlarged heart. Basic science. The heart needs oxygen. Reason, common sense. The heart needs it's pumping. The heart needs that. When you are getting shit cut, the circulation cut, when you aren't able to breathe, it fucks with your heart. So somebody who already had heart problems,
swelling or edema of the lungs. And the state was not satisfied with Dr. Baker's work. And so they have contracted with numerous physicians to contradict Dr. Baker's findings.
Wait. So you mean to tell me that living in a world of second opinions, because that's exactly what the fuck we need, because not everybody is a motherfucking, matter of fact, you aren't the best at what you do. You may be really good at what you do, but you aren't the best. Niggas go to the doctor, and what do people tell people when they get diagnosed with some shit or when they see some shit? What happens when you go to the doctor and they say, yo, this is going on with you, this is going on with you? Get a second opinion. You know how many people went for a second opinion to the doctor and found out that they either had some shit or really didn't have some shit? I knew this was coming. You see the way he worded it in the beginning, the one and only person that conducted an autopsy and then went through the whole entire shit only to just now say, hey, they got a second opinion. Listen to this bullshit.
This will ultimately be another significant battle in this trial. What was Mr. Floyd's actual cause of death? The evidence will show that Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia that occurred as a result of hypertension, his coronary disease, the ingestion of methamphetamine and fentanyl, and the adrenaline flowing through his body, all of which acted to further.
And why did that happen, sir? Why the fuck did that happen? Let's just play his game and say that Derek wasn't the one that choked him out. Why did he have all that going on in his body? Why did he have all that stress, that anxiety, that hypertension? Why? Why? There was a reason. So what does common sense tell you? Come on, man. Be smart.
An already compromised heart. At the conclusion of this evidence, you will be instructed as to the law, the elements of the offense.
These niggas really trash.
The court
His
will
defense
give you
is trash as
detailed
fuck.
instructions on what you must find to convict Mr. Chauvin of these charges. But when you review the actual evidence, and when you hear the law and apply reason and common sense, there will only be one just verdict, and that is to find Mr. Chauvin not guilty. Thank you.
The bitch of it all. The bitch of it all. Let me hit y'all with another reason and common sense real quick. There is a unhealthy, toxic fucking relationship between the police and black people. If I'm a black man at my side, see, this is another reason why it pisses me off that they try to demonize George Floyd by using his size to try to justify why they acted the way that they did and why he got murdered. I am a 6'5", 250-pound black man. This is how they view people like me. This is how they give excuses to murder people like me. Talking about my size, talking about how it was a struggle. And of course it's going to be believable that there was some big ass struggle because they're dealing with some big ass dude. But let's talk about the history. There's a toxic history between the police and black people. So the reason why somebody who might be on drugs would act a certain way around the police, think about that. And the common sense of it all is that these motherfuckers find any excuse to kill people like me. I want to get away from these people because I know ain't no way for me to escape this. And if you are on any type of drugs or influenced under anything, any of your senses are going to be they're going to be more sensitive. You're going to be more paranoid about the situation. You're going to be more hypersensitive. You're going to be more willing to have restraint towards motherfuckers you are terrified of. The reason and the common sense. This guy really tried to start out his motherfucking opening statements with reason and common sense. And I just sat here and debunked all that shit. I mean, really, all you have to do is see the video. All you have to do is watch the video. And I hate the fact that they're trying to demean the video or try to devalue the video or try to make it seem like the video means nothing in a court hearing. You're on trial. Do you understand? These motherfuckers get off at video evidence. The court of law bust nuts when you have video evidence because they don't have to sit through a bunch of fucking witnesses. They have evidence to show what the fuck happened. But we're dealing with a police officer and a white man. He has double the protection for the collection. It's not just his complexion. Sorry for rhyming. I'm a rapper, so I got to do that sometimes. It just happens. But he has that. That's a fact. Not only do you hold white privilege, but you hold police privilege. They are going to try to find every reason to try to make you seem like you did nothing wrong, even if they have it on video. I knew this trial was going to piss me off, man. And I know there's 6 more hours of this fucking shit. But this shit's going to be happening every day, and I'm going to be covering it every day. And I want y'all to be here for that, for real. I want y'all to really, really stay in tune with what's happening, man, because this shit is real. This shit is fucking real. But usually I promote I promote the Beat page and the Beat album and shit because I just put, some shit out yesterday. But I know for a fact with this going on, I need to do one thing and one thing only. And this is the only way that I have been ending these fucking streams when it comes to this trial, because this is the only thing that fucking matters to me when it comes to this case. So I'm going to continue to play this motherfucker, and I'm continue to motherfucking spread this type of message because we are not out to fight. This shit is not over, and it will not end until we continue to press back and push back and fight back. So with that said, we outside, man. This song was dedicated to George Floyd right when the shit happened, man. When everything was going down in my city, all the protests, all the riots, all the police pushing back, this is what came out of it, man. So here, this is how we gonna end it. Let's go.
We outside, Chauvin Martin. We gon' ride, Eric Garner. We outside, Samir Rice. We gon' ride, Mike Brown. We outside, Freddie Gray. We gon' ride, Lando. We outside, Breonna Taylor. We gon' ride, George Floyd. We outside, Alton Sterling. We gon' ride, Antonio Martin. We outside, Walter Scott. We gon' ride, Jamar Clark. We outside, Corey Gaines. We gon' ride, Aiyana Jones. We outside, Terrence Crutcher. We gon' ride, we not alone. Fuck keeping the peace. We off the leash, fuck the police. I cannot breathe from taking the knee. No more to speak, we burning the streets and y'all feeling the heat. You don't understand, take several seats. We got over 400 years of receipts and I ran out of patience explaining the violence. Part of the problem is you staying silent. All of my brothers and sisters, we riding. Fuck that shit up, my nigga, go riot. All this pain and they want us to hide it. Be good niggers and listen to Whitey. KKK be the ones with the badges, protecting and serving they own asses. And it's not a few, it's the masses. So burn this place down to ashes. It's a revolution. My people tired of white excuses. Only matter of time before we lose it. Then we run up in your shit and get to looting. Trump said they gon' get to shooting, so we bust back like they intruding. This is our house, nigga, we ain't moving. Not even the army can stop the movement. Pick a side, start choosing. This ain't the time to be clueless. No Stacey Dash, this is Huey Newton. Nigga, black power, my city proved it. I ain't never gonna be ashamed. All my people go and do your thing. Just remember the ones we lost to police. And if they forget, say their name. We outside, Trayvon Martin. We gon' ride, Eric Garner. We outside, Samir Rice. We gon' ride, Mike Brown. We outside, Freddie Gray. We gon' ride, Lando. We outside, Breonna Taylor. We gon' ride, George Floyd. We outside, Alton Sterling. We gon' ride, Antonio Martin. We outside, Walter Scott. We gon' ride, Jamar Clark. We outside, Corey Gaines. We gon' ride, Aiyana Jones. We outside, Terrence Crutcher. We gon' ride, we not alone.
Y'all stay blessed, man. Y'all have a good one.